What if the most powerful thing you could do right now is nothing? Not speak, not react, not explain yourself. Just stop. There's a version of you that nobody has ever met. A version that doesn't flinch when someone disrespects you. A version that doesn't feel the desperate urge to fill every silence with words, with noise, with approval. A version that sits with stillness the way most people can't sit with themselves for even 5 uninterrupted minutes. That version isn't a fantasy. It's not some idealized self you'll never reach. It's you, buried, hidden beneath years of conditioning that taught you the worst possible lesson. That silence is dangerous, that being quiet means being invisible. That if you stop speaking, if you stop performing, if you stop reacting, you'll disappear. But here's what they never told you. The people who truly have power in this world, they're not the loudest ones in the room. They never were. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you is going to change how you see yourself, other people, and every interaction you've ever had. And I need you to really hear this. Not just passively consume it the way you consume everything else, because by the end of this, something in you is going to shift. And once it does, you won't be able to unsee it. Let me start by dismantling something you've believed your entire life. You were taught, not explicitly, but constantly, through every social interaction, every classroom, every family dinner, every relationship, that speaking is strength, that confidence means having something to say, that if you're quiet, you're weak, passive, boring, suspicious even. Think about it. When you go silent in a conversation, what do you feel? For most people, it's discomfort, a pulling sensation in the chest, an almost physical need to fill the space, to explain, to justify, to connect. And so you talk, and talk, and talk. Not because you have something meaningful to say, but because the silence feels unbearable. And that's not a personality trait. That's a wound. You've been trained since childhood that your value is tied to your visibility. To be heard is to matter. To be quiet is to disappear. And in a world that rewards the loudest, the most reactive, the most performative, you internalized a profound and devastating lie. That your worth depends on your expression. Social media didn't create this. It just weaponized it. It handed you a machine that rewards you with dopamine every time you speak, every time you react, every time you perform your life for an invisible audience. And slowly, without realizing it, you became addicted to noise. Not external noise, though that's there too, but the noise inside your own mind. The constant need to narrate, to comment, to respond, to be seen. This is the world you live in. And most people will spend their entire lives inside it, never once questioning whether the noise is actually serving them, or whether it's slowly destroying them. Pain. I want you to think about someone in your life who drains you. You know the one. Maybe it's a person who always needs a reaction from you, who says something just sharp enough to provoke, just careless enough to sting, and then watches, waiting to see how you'll respond. And you react. Every time. You defend yourself, or you go quiet and stew in it, or you try to explain your position for the 100th time, hoping this will finally be the conversation that makes them understand. But it never is. Or think about the last time you were in a conflict. Really in it. The kind where you said things you didn't mean, where your voice got louder as your arguments got weaker, where afterward you felt hollowed out and ashamed. Not because you lost, but because you showed too much. You revealed exactly how much you cared, how much it hurt, how easily you could be moved. And in that moment of exposure, something important happened. The other person saw your buttons. They filed that information away. And from that point on, consciously or not, they knew how to find you. This is what noise does to you. This is what reactivity costs you. Every time you react from emotion, from that burning need to be understood, to be right, to be validated, you hand someone a map to your interior. You tell them exactly where you live. And people, especially people who don't have your best interests at heart, will use that map. They will return to the same wounds, press the same buttons, pull the same strings, because you've shown them that it works. And the terrifying part? Most of the time, they're not even doing it consciously. They don't sit down and think about how to manipulate you. The dynamic just naturally seeks its level. You signal that you can be moved, and the world, other egos, other wounds, other unconscious forces, simply responds to that signal. Now here's the question I need you to sit with. What would happen if you stopped responding to the signal? What would happen if you became not cold, not cruel, not distant, but simply still? Carl Jung spent his life mapping the human psyche, and one of the most powerful ideas he gave us, one that almost nobody truly applies, is the concept of the unconscious. Not just your unconscious, but the one that operates in every room you walk into, in every relationship you engage with, in every dynamic you think you consciously control. Jung understood that most human behavior is driven not by conscious choice, but by unconscious forces, by wounds, by shadows, by the parts of ourselves we've refused to look at. And when two people interact, it's rarely just two people. It's two entire subterranean worlds, colliding in real time, pulling each other's strings without either person fully understanding why. When you react, when you rise to the bait, when you over-explain, when you need the last word, you are being operated by forces below the surface, by the wounded child who needed to be heard, by the teenager who was told they were too much or not enough, by every moment where your voice was dismissed or your silence was mistaken for weakness. You are not reacting to the present moment. You are reacting to everything that ever happened to you that looks like this moment. And Nietzsche, that ferocious, misunderstood genius, had a word for the person who has mastered themselves beneath the surface. He called it self-overcoming. The idea that greatness is not about dominating others, but about dominating the chaos within yourself. That true power is not the power to shout louder. It is the power to remain silent when everything inside you is screaming. He wrote that the strength of a man, and I use that word in its broadest possible sense, is not in his victories over others, but in his sovereignty over himself, in his ability to choose his response, to be the eye of the storm, rather than the storm itself. The Stoics said something similar centuries earlier. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, commander of armies, faced with betrayals and wars, and a civilization trying to come apart at its seams, wrote in his private journal that you have power over your mind, not outside events, not as a cliché, not as a motivational poster, but as a lived, daily practice of extraordinary discipline. Epictetus, a man who was literally enslaved, who had no control over anything external in his life, developed a philosophy of such radical internal sovereignty that his teachings have outlasted every emperor who ever owned him. His idea was simple and devastating. There are things within your control and things outside of it. And the moment you confuse the two, the moment you let external noise dictate your internal state, you have surrendered the only freedom that was ever truly yours. Silence in the Stoic tradition is not emptiness. It is command. It is the outward expression of a mind that has learned to rule itself. Core revelation. Now I want to give you something. Not a technique, not a trick, but a way of seeing. Silence is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything you haven't said yet. And here's the part that will change how you move through every room for the rest of your life. What you don't say is infinitely more powerful than what you do. Think about the most magnetic people you've ever encountered. The ones who drew you in without trying. The ones who didn't rush to fill the space with words, who didn't explain themselves excessively, who didn't react when you expected them to. There was something almost gravitational about them, wasn't there? Something that made you want to know more, that made you lean in, that made you feel almost against your will, that they were holding something that you couldn't quite reach. That quality has a name, and it's not charisma, not confidence, not status. Those are symptoms. The root is internal silence, a deep, practiced stillness that radiates outward and restructures every interaction around it. When you speak less, people listen more. When you react less, people try harder. When you stop broadcasting your interior to every person who asks, you create something rare in a world built on radical transparency, mystery, and mystery in a world of constant exposure is one of the last remaining forms of power. But here's where it gets darker, and I need you to stay with me here, because this is the part that most people resist, not because it's wrong, but because it's uncomfortably true. The reason you can't be silent isn't just conditioning, it's fear. Specifically, it's the fear that if you stop performing, if you stop explaining, justifying, proving, reacting, you will be forgotten, dismissed, irrelevant, that your value is contingent on your constant visibility. And underneath that fear is an even deeper one, that if people actually saw you, the real you, the quiet you, the one who doesn't always have a clever response, they wouldn't stay. This is the wound that the noise is covering, and until you look at it directly, the noise will never stop. But this is just the surface. What I've shown you so far is the architecture, the why behind the noise, the mechanism behind the reactivity, the fear beneath the performance. But there's a layer beneath this that most people never reach, a darker truth about what happens when you start practicing silence, what it reveals about the people around you, about the dynamics you've been participating in, and about the version of yourself that has been waiting very patiently for you to finally stop talking long enough to hear it. In the next part, I'm going to show you what silence actually does in real-world conditions, not the philosophical ideal, the lived experience, the way it destabilizes people who were used to controlling you, the way it clarifies, with brutal precision, who in your life was actually in relationship with you, and who was in relationship with your reactions. Here's the uncomfortable truth about human relationships that nobody says out loud. Most of what passes for connection is actually transaction. Not in a cynical way, not because people are inherently manipulative, but because the ego is inherently transactional. It gives in order to receive. It performs in order to be seen. It loves in ways that are always, at some level, about having that love returned, confirmed, mirrored. And this is not a flaw, it's the default state of an unexamined human being. When you start practicing silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't react, doesn't explain, doesn't seek validation, something remarkable happens to the people around you. And remarkable is a gentle word for it. They become uncomfortable. Not all of them, but the ones who are feeding off your reactivity, the ones who needed your emotional output to regulate their own interior states. They will feel it immediately. They will probe for the reaction. They'll escalate. They'll say something sharper, do something more extreme, reach for a button they know has worked before. And when it doesn't work, when you remain still, they will interpret your silence in the worst possible way. They will call it coldness, arrogance, passive aggression, They will tell you that you've changed, that you're different now, that they preferred you before. And what they mean, even if they don't know it, is that they preferred you when you were easier to move, when they knew exactly how to find you and exactly how to make you react. This is where most people break, because being told that your growth looks like cruelty is one of the most disorienting experiences a human being can have. It makes you want to explain, to soften, to go back to the version of yourself that was more legible, more accessible, more comfortably reactive. Don't. Here's what Jung would say about this moment. The people who resist your individuation, your becoming, are not doing it out of malice. They are doing it out of unconscious self-preservation. Your growth threatens the stability of the dynamic they've built with you. Your silence collapses the structure they relied on without realizing it. And their resistance is information. Perhaps the most important information you'll receive about what the relationship was actually built on. And the people who stay, the ones who don't require you to perform, who don't need you to react, who can sit in silence with you and feel the quality of it rather than the discomfort of it. Those are the relationships worth protecting. They are extraordinarily rare, and you will only find them once you've stopped drowning out your own signal with noise. Now, let's talk about something even more specific, because this isn't just about other people. It's about the voice inside your own head. The mind, untrained, is one of the loudest places in the universe. It doesn't stop. It replays conversations from years ago. It rehearses arguments with people who aren't in the room. It catastrophizes, criticizes, compares, and performs. All without pause, all without your conscious permission. And most people live their entire lives inside this noise, mistaking it for reality. Mistaking the commentary for the experience. The Zen tradition has a name for this: monkey mind, the restless, grasping, commenting, reacting intelligence that can never simply be with what is. It always has to make the moment into something: a story, a lesson, a complaint, a performance. And it is exhausting, not in a way that shows on your face necessarily, but in a way that accumulates over years into a deep, unnamed fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to fix. Because you're not tired from doing, you're tired from narrating, from the constant internal broadcast of a mind that has never learned to be quiet. So, what does it actually look like? In practice, in your body, in your daily life, when you begin to master this? It doesn't look dramatic. That's the first thing you need to understand. The transformation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a moment of enlightenment where everything suddenly makes sense. It comes slowly, almost imperceptibly, in the spaces between your reactions. It looks like pausing before you respond to a message that made your stomach tighten. Not because you're playing games, not because you're strategically withholding, but because you've given yourself long enough to respond from your center rather than your wound. It looks like being in a conversation where someone says something designed to diminish you, and instead of immediately defending yourself, you simply hold their eyes for a moment and say nothing. And in that silence, in the space where your reaction used to live, something shifts. The dynamic shifts because they expected you to fill that silence and you didn't. And now they're filling it instead. And what comes out of their mouth in that unguarded moment will tell you everything you need to know. It looks like sitting alone, truly alone, without your phone, without music, without the ambient noise you've grown so accustomed to that silence feels like something is wrong, and letting your mind do whatever it needs to do. The chaos that comes first, the restlessness, the boredom that is really just withdrawal. And then, if you stay, if you don't reach for the distraction, a kind of settling, a depth beginning to reveal itself beneath the surface of the noise. Marcus Aurelius called this the inner citadel, the fortified place inside yourself that external events cannot breach. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built a center, a place of such internal coherence that the noise of the world, the provocations, the drama, the constant demand for your reaction, none of it can reach the core of who you are. And from that place, something extraordinary becomes possible. You begin to choose, not to react automatically, not to perform unconsciously, not to speak because the silence feels dangerous, but to make genuine choices in real time about what deserves your energy, your words, your attention. You become selective in a way that is not elitism, but self-respect. You stop pouring your interior into every conversation that asks for it. You stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what they think of you. You stop arguing in rooms where the truth was never really the point. And the energy that frees up, the cognitive and emotional and spiritual energy that was going into all of that noise, begins to compound. It accumulates. It goes somewhere real. The people who have truly mastered this are some of the most formidable human beings who have ever existed. Not because they were born special, not because they had advantages others didn't, but because they made a decision at some point, quiet, non-dramatic, deeply private, that they were going to stop leaking their power into the world's noise and start directing it inward, towards something that actually mattered. That decision is available to you, right now, not someday, not when circumstances are better or easier or quieter. Now, in the midst of all of it, that's the only place it's ever available. I want to leave you with something that I think about often. There is a kind of silence that is not absence. It is not withdrawal, not coldness, not defeat. It is the silence of a person who has finally stopped needing to prove something, who has come to rest in themselves in a way that doesn't require external confirmation to hold its shape. Most people will never experience this, not because they aren't capable of it. Every human being is capable of it, but because the world is extraordinarily good at making noise feel necessary, at making reactivity feel like engagement, and engagement feel like aliveness, and aliveness feel like it has to be loud, public, constant. But you are not most people. If you were, you wouldn't still be here. You wouldn't have stayed through the uncomfortable parts, the parts that held a mirror up to things you've been avoiding. The fact that you're still with me tells me something about you. That somewhere beneath the noise, you already know this. That some part of you has been waiting for permission to go quiet, to stop, to be still enough to hear what's actually there. Nietzsche wrote in one of his most devastating and beautiful passages that those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. And I would add to that, those who have learned to be silent are thought to be empty by those who have never discovered what lives in the quiet. What lives in the quiet is you, the actual you, not the performance, not the reaction, not the carefully constructed exterior that you show to a world that is always watching, always evaluating, always waiting for you to slip. The version of you that exists when no one is watching and nothing needs to be proved, and the silence is no longer something to escape, but something to inhabit. That version, the one who can sit with themselves without distraction, who can remain still when the world demands reaction, who has learned that the most powerful response is sometimes no response at all. That version is rare, almost vanishingly rare in a civilization built on noise. But they exist, and you can be one of them. The world will not make this easy for you. The noise will return. It always does. Your phone will buzz, your relationships will provoke, your own mind will generate its commentary, whether you ask it to or not. That's not a problem to be solved. It's the permanent condition in which the practice happens. The practice is not arriving at silence. The practice is returning to it again and again, in the midst of everything that wants to pull you away. It's choosing in that split second before the reaction fires to pause, to breathe, to ask from that still place inside yourself, what actually needs to be said here? Whether anything does. What you would say if you weren't afraid. What you would do if you didn't need anyone's approval. That practice, sustained over time, changes not just your behavior, but your nature. It changes who you are in rooms. It changes the quality of your relationships. It changes your relationship with yourself, which is the only place any of this ever really begins. You came into this world whole. Somewhere along the way, the noise convinced you that you needed to fill yourself with it to be real. You don't. The most powerful thing you can do right now, the single most courageous act available to you in this moment, is to stop, to be quiet, to let what is actually there finally surface. Before you close this and move on to the next thing, before the feed pulls you somewhere else, I want you to sit with one question. Not comment it, not share it, not perform an answer for anyone else. Just ask it to yourself, privately, in whatever quiet space you can find. What have I been using noise to avoid? Because the answer to that question is the beginning of everything. If something in this reached you, if something landed in a way you weren't expecting, drop a single word in the comments. Just one word that describes what you felt. I don't need your analysis. I don't need a long response. I want to see what one word of genuine honesty looks like in the comment section of a world that never stops talking. And if you're ready, not someday, but today, to start living from that still place inside yourself, then you already know what to do. You've always known. The only question was whether you were ready to be quiet enough to hear it.